And we see even as he approaches this ruler of the eunuchs, this individual that is in charge over him, one of his concerns is the safety and the well-being of the individual who's set over him. And yet he recognizes as well as that he had to do right. And he would not defile himself. The consequence of it is that God used him. And so anyone that would accuse Daniel of living a life of ease and having it easy certainly would forget all the times that his life was in danger and was threatened. We know all the stories about Daniel, and they're usually danger stories, aren't they? He stood for right. In chapter 1, he stood for prayer and for praying to his God and worshiping his God, and he was cast into a lion's den. I don't know how easy that would be. And frankly, I don't know how easy it would be to honor a God whose will it was for him to be in captivity and have the right attitude toward God. Just portrays this spirit that says, God, you do all things well. By the way, I'm not implying this evening at all, and don't infer from my implication at all that Daniel was unjustly treated to be in the captivity. I believe Daniel was in the best place he could possibly be in his day and age, and he was the man that God used. Okay, a lot of preliminary information, but I want to look at this attitude that Nebuchadnezzar has this evening. I don't think it'll take long to do so. The story is simply this in summary, and we read it just a moment ago. Nebuchadnezzar dreamed a dream, and it greatly troubled him. I know I've heard many people say, well, this was back in a day and age, in a time period when dreams meant a great deal. And things are different than that today. Well, why, first of all? But secondly, this dream was obviously not something that Nebuchadnezzar could dismiss from his mind for a couple of reasons. And by the way, this is just some application. I'm not teaching something weird here, so don't take this and go nuts with it, or don't make a big issue out of it. I'll offer it for your help, and you can do what you like with it, whether you agree with it or not. I'm not really concerned about that. I don't think it's important, to be honest with you. A good way to know whether there's something to a dream that you have, the fact that you remember it. The thing that was striking about Nebuchadnezzar's dream was that he couldn't remember it. Usually, when you and I can remember a dream very vividly, I don't know about you, but most people that come to me and tell me they remember a dream, my observation of them has been to do this. And by the way, do this to somebody that tells you that they've had a dream and make something of it. And it'll just give you some help in knowing whether or not they want to make something of it, or whether there may be something to it. Just check their story a few times. Because many times I've had somebody share a dream with me right after it's occurred, and they told me this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And 6 months later when they tell that story, there was a whole lot more that happened than what they could remember right after the dream. You know what I'm talking about? This and this. And what do you think that means? And the next time Jesus appeared, they remembered what he looked like and what he had. And I just tell you what that is. It's just their imagination keeps adding and adding and adding to the dreams. I'm not negating, I'm not saying there's nothing to dreams. Don't misunderstand me here this evening, but that would be a litmus test in a sense. This dream of Nebuchadnezzar's was unique for one reason, and what was that? What made his dream unique? Not a trick question, I said it a minute ago. Yes, ma'am?
It bothered him, but he couldn't remember anything.
Yes, ma'am. Textbook answer. It bothered him, but he couldn't remember what it was. There was something very troubling about it, and he couldn't remember what it was. Now, he knew if it were interpreted or it were told to him that what it was, then he would recognize it. He would know that it were true. By the way, if I were a Chaldean, I think I would have taken a shot at it when it came to, you being chopped in pieces and your house being made into the dump or the dunghill. I would have tried. King, this is what you saw, and this is the implication of it. But they were at least honest enough about it, because they seemed to know that there was enough to this dream that he would recognize it. But if I were going to die for it, they were fake anyway. They were pretenders anyway. It's really easy to pretend to know something based on what you already know, and to make something out of something once you have information. But it is interesting to me that it seems as though God has spoken to Nebuchadnezzar. I think if you and I were to take and make a point out of this, our point with regard to Nebuchadnezzar's dream was that it was significant, because God was trying to tell him something. And that's what made it stand out to him. It's what made it trouble him, so that he couldn't sleep and he couldn't rest. And he had to know the interpretation of the dream. Something that along with that, by way of application, or if you want to classify that with that, first of all, God had spoken to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, he didn't know God. He didn't have the ability to interpret his dream, but God was trying to tell him something. The thing that's interesting to me about that is that Nebuchadnezzar was interested in knowing God. He was interested in knowing God. You say, Pastor, how do you know that? Because he was unwilling to accept a fake. He was unwilling to accept a fake. In verse 5, the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, with regard to the dream, the thing is gone from me. If ye will not make known unto me the dream, with the interpretation there. The interpretation would be easy if you knew the dream, right? These shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made in a dunghill. And of course, the opposite is true. If you show me the dream, the interpretation thereof, you shall receive, I'm in verse 6 of chapter 2, of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. King Nebuchadnezzar was not in the position where he wanted to play games. He was not in the position where he wanted to hear a story that would pacify him. By the way, this would be remarkably different from the times that Jeremiah was used to prophesy to the kings of Israel and Judah, wouldn't it? Remember what happened? When he would prophesy, they would get other kings to come and prophesy something good. And the attitude of the people who are supposed to know who God is, the God who is the living God, the sovereign God, who is the capital G, Lord of all God, the individuals who knew who he was were not interested in hearing from him. But Nebuchadnezzar recognized, and you can mark this down and you can make it a part of your life and apply it to you, he recognized that truth is truth regardless of what you believe. He recognized that truth is truth regardless of what you believe. And he was not willing to accept something that was convenient or that fit with his preferences or his worldview or his life situation. He wanted to know what the truth was. Friend, I fear that it would be far easier in our generation to preach to people what they want to hear than it is to preach truth. And I think that's true of most generations. It's true of most of us, isn't it? Truth is what's helpful. Truth is what's helpful, but most of us don't necessarily want help. Most of us want to feel like we're okay. Brother Chris and I talked to a dear lady the other day who was lost, and she was very interesting. We had a nice conversation with her and had a good time. But one of the things that we told her, we were from church, and first thing she told us, she says, well, you know, I may look like I'm poor, but I'm not. Well, where we were at, we didn't suspect that she was poor. Wasn't a suspicion of ours, but she let us know she was very wealthy. And she said, I'll give you some money. And we said, we don't want any money. We're not here for money. Oh, well, I'll give you some anyway. And we said, no, we don't want any money. You know what? I was thinking about that this week, and I've had that, believe it or not, on door-to-door visitation. I've had that response several times where people say, well, could I do something for you? Could I give you some money? Could I donate something to your church? Could I do something? And my response is always no. We won't receive anything from you. Thank you if you'd like to. What we would like is for you to come to our church. We don't want anything from you. And I'll tell you the reason for that is because people would rather feel as though they're a good person than have the gospel preached to them. And they would rather do a good deed and see that we're the ones that are needy of them and God needs them rather than that they need God. And so we may be poor as dirt, and I would just tell you we won't accept money from the lost. We just won't. And that, Lord help me to always have that mindset and that belief. You say, Pastor, I wouldn't have tithed tonight if I knew you thought that. You need to accept money from those heathen. No, we don't. God doesn't need money. He doesn't need the resources of the lost. They need Him. And I believe that if you and I were to go down the street and knock on doors and ask for money, we'd get a far better reception than we would going down the street and telling people about their need for Jesus Christ and God's love toward them, which was demonstrated on the cross. Now, I'm not ranting and raving about society today. We know mankind is wicked and there's nothing new about it. But I just want to tell you, if you want to know God, you need to want to know truth. If you want to know God, you need to want to know truth, and it won't be this